Hello YouTube. It is finally time for another project on the 2000 H1. If you saw my last couple of videos, I gave you a spoiler alert. We're going to be installing these brand new differentials that have the ARB lockers inside. I took these out to the guys at Predator and I let them install the ARB lockers. Otherwise, I won't get a warranty if I do it myself. So I went back out and I picked those up. And these are some 273 differentials. Brand new. I found somewhere halfway across the state. Got a good deal on them. The ones that are in this truck are the ABS differentials. They're 256 gear ratio, and you can't change the gear ratio if you have ABS brakes, because the tone ring on the end of the half shaft will not communicate correctly with the output shaft on the transmission, and you'll get an ABS error every time. So I did a full ABS delete on this truck, so I can pretty much use any gear ratio I want. By going to a 273, I'm going to lower them, have a little more of a hole shot, a little more torque off the line, and with the Allison 6-speed, I don't think that's going to be an issue. So while I'm putting all this stuff in, I'm putting in these heavy-duty plates that I got from Anvil Motorworks. They're a cool company. They're a little bit hard to find online, but these are the exact same plates that Modifia makes for about half the price. I've got all new brackets here. I bought new ones. I took them, had them stripped, had them powder coated, and this one I won't actually use. I think Predator put a custom one in when they did the 12-inch brake conversion, so this one might not get used. Also going to be good to the new half shaft bolts, axle flange seals. I have all new hardware to put everything together, and braided line from the diff units up to the air manifold. So I've already got that all done. I actually did that a long time ago, and I'm going to be running these ARBs off of off CO2 tanks. So I got a little tank here from the guys over at Power Tank, and they claim that this little tank right here will engage the ARBs over 500 times on one bottle fill. And then down here is the manifold, and I've got the braided line fittings that go through the bed, they come out from underneath. The switches are already run. We'll get into that later, where I put the switches. But for now, we're going to get going on taking all the stuff under the truck apart and getting this out. But getting the stuff out and putting these in. So the first thing we're going to do on these is we are going to leak test them. If I was running an ARB compressor or any other kind of compressor, I wouldn't really worry too much. But if I have a leak, and that little power tank is going to bleed down, and then I've got a spare on the other side. But I want to make sure before this goes in that will actually hold air for some time. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this braided line and we're going to connect it to the differential, and the other one's going to go to this gauge right here. We can plug it in here. I can put air to it, choke off the valve, and see how much air it holds and if it bleeds down over time. So if you're going to put braided lines in your truck, do not buy that junk on Amazon. I had another video where I did my transmission cooler, and I can't stress that enough. That stuff on Amazon is garbage. Buy good Russell Superflex hose and some good fittings, and you'll only have to do it once, and you'll never have to worry about it. So anyway, this is probably going to be hopefully not too long of a video. I'm not going to capture everything, but the key points. But so we're going to start with getting set up and make sure these things hold air, and when we get that set up, we'll come back. Okay, the way we leak test this ARB locker is we've got the airline hooked to this collection of fittings here. It's just a valve and a T basically, and ARBs run on about 110 to 150 psi. So we're going to open this up and we're going to pressurize, and hey, I've got 110 in the compressor. So now I know that ARB locker is fully energized. I'm going to close this valve. We're going to disconnect the air hose, and we're going to let that sit for a long time to see how long it takes for that to start bleeding down. And we'll get going on some other stuff while we test this, and then we'll test the other one later. Okay, while we were waiting for the leak test to complete on the differentials, I got started on taking out some of the other parts. So the undercarriage protection, not a big deal. 6 bolts, falls right out. Drive shaft comes out easy. And I always put some kind of a clamp on the end of the bearing caps on the universal joint, because if those fall off, the little needle bearings go everywhere, and then you're probably going to end up replacing your U-joint. So this truck has a 12-inch brakes, and I did struggle to get those rotors out of there, out from get them away from the flanges and out of the calipers. So I know that is going to fight me big time when I go to put those back in, unless I find a simpler way to do it. I didn't want to break the brake lines apart because I didn't want to have the brake fluid going all over the place. I don't feel like bleeding it if I didn't have to. So I just zip tied the calipers up to the frame. We're going to go under and see what that looks like in a second. But this stuff comes off pretty easy. And let's get under the truck and see where I'm at with that. Okay, I got the brake calipers zip tied up to the frame here. And if you're going to do it this way, use some really heavy duty zip ties. Don't use thin ones. If all you have is thin ones, then go ahead and double and triple them up, because those calipers are heavy. And if those things break free, you're going to destroy your brake line if a thing comes down. Same thing on this side. Got it zip tied up real well, and didn't distort the line at all, so that's not going to be an issue. It's going to be fun putting back together, but this way you don't have to take your brake lines off. And your half shafts, they can just hang. There's that one on that side, that one on that side. If you wanted to get them out of the way, then you got to take the plug out of your gear hub and take the bolt out, and then they just pull right out. So these flanges have to come off next. So I'm going to show you how I made a tool for that. But these have to come off in order to get these bolts out. So there's 2 bolts on this side. There's 2 on the other side. And then you've got 2 up front here on this bracket, here and here. And once you take those 6 bolts out, you should be able to just lower this thing down. It should wiggle out from over the top of this cross member here. And there is a vent line up there. And I'm probably just going to cut it, because you'll never ever get that tubing off of the fitting. So I got a little trick for putting that together. We'll show you later. I've already drained the oil out of this, and the brackets for the brake calipers, they can stay on. You can swap them over to the new Diff once you get it out of there. It's not worth taking them out right now. But so anyway, next is to take the flanges off, and then 6 bolts, and cut that vent line. And this thing should drop right out. And I've probably got about 2 hours into this job so far. So it's a lot quicker than I thought it was going to be. But I ended up picking this thing up on Amazon, which is going to roll around and go underneath that differential. And I got to put some wood under here because I have the truck jacked up so high, it's not going to reach. But this will be really nice for supporting that diff and lowering it back down and rolling it out. And to get the flange off, because both sides are going to spin, I had this bar that I found laying around, and I made this aluminum block to bolt to the end of it, and that's going to bolt right on to the flange and hold it in place while I get the nut off. And this will come in really handy for torquing it back down when it's all done. So anyway, that's as far as I got right now. So now I'm going to take the flanges off and then see if I can drop that unit out of there. And another thing, the reason I'm replacing all of my half shaft bolts is because I needed some back a while back, and then I ended up buying these. The heads on these are just way too big, and I had to put these on with a open end wrench. I couldn't get a socket or a box end on this, so these were a pain in the butt. So finally, I got the right bolts. And once you break those Norlock washers free, they go right into the trash. Do not reuse those. Once you loosen those, they're junk. So always replace those if you're taking your half shafts off. So anyway, that's it for now. Let me get set up and get the flanges off, and I should be able to drop this thing down with 6 bolts, and then we'll come back. All right. So after a little over 2 hours, I have bled down to about 102 psi. So I lost 8 psi in 2 hours, and that could be right here in my manifold. Who knows? But I am more than happy with that. So I think it's time to get these installed. Okay, so that took about an hour to get that out of there. 6 bolts, they were extremely tight. Luckily, I was able to get an impact up in there and get them loosened up. And then there's all the brackets that held them up. So Actually, the gears in this are still really tight for having 77,000 miles on them. And these are the ABS diffs, which they've been obsolete for a long time, but I think these are going to end up on eBay. But anyway, so I got that out. Now, putting everything back together is going to be a little bit of a process, because you can't just take all those brackets, and actually the new ones are up here, but you can't just take them, stick them up in there, tighten them up. It's got to be spaced and positioned just right. So the forward bracket, or yeah, this one right here, that's the one that ultimately positions your differential. So that one's going to have to be installed, run up, and when you get everything started, that's the one that's going to set the position of your differential. If you notice, everything else has slots in it, so you got to have some room to move stuff around. And then once you get that front one tightened up, you can go ahead and tighten up all the other ones, because then it'll be positioned where it's supposed to be. And my little vent line did end up popping off as I was pulling on it. I didn't think it would, but I'm going to replace that fitting. It's not going to go in the new diff. I'm going to do something different. But anyway, that's it for getting the unit out of there. The little stand I got on, I think it was like 60 or 70 bucks on Amazon. It actually worked great. Rolled right up under there, helped hold it up. This will hang up. If you ever take one of these out, if you take that off, it'll probably come out a whole lot easier. But this thing got hung up on the cross member quite a bit, so getting up in there and trying to pull that backwards and rotate down at the same time and unscrew the stand took a minute, but I got it out of there. So I think these are going to come off and stay off until the diff is back up in there. They just kind of, they were great for holding on to them, grab handles, but I think it's going to be a lot easier to put back in if I put those in last, but after it's been mounted. Anyway, that's it for today. So this whole job so far has taken me about 4 hours, and everything should go back in really nice. We'll see about how much trouble those brakes are going to give me getting all that stuff wiggled back up in there. But we'll get started on that probably tomorrow, and then we'll take some video and show you the steps along the way. All right, so this forward bracket went in. This one you can tighten up all the way. This bolt back here is really hard to get to. You're only going to get to that with an open-end wrench to hold it in place while you tighten it up from the backside. The gas tank is just too close. So this one is bolted tight. I mean, you can suck it down. It only has one place to go. There's no slots in it. But all this other stuff back here, so here's the other hangers. This is going to have to stay loose. This is going to have to stay loose. And this plate here is going to have to stay loose so it can move around a little bit, because this is right here is what actually determines the location of your differential. So once you run these up all the way, then you can go ahead, you can kind of get these will position themselves, and then you can draw all this stuff up around here. But you can't just tighten this stuff up and try to put the differential in, because it's got to mate to the back side of this right here. It's got to be close. So that's the process for doing that. And now it's time to load the differential up in here. So as I get ready to stuff this axle up under the truck, this is what I did for the vent line. I just took a 1/8 inch MPT by 1/4 inch brass hose barb and stuck that into the diff with a hose clamp. And I put about a 12 inch piece of 1/4 inch IB rubber fuel line on the end of that. And then this is the piece that was down on the old differential, and this is 1/4 inch OD tubing. This stuff slides up in here really nice. I mean, you can jam this up in here like 2-3 inches, and then just put a hose clamp right there, and then you've got a good connection for your vent line, and you're not trying to stuff this old 25-year-old tubing back onto the stock fitting, which it's never going to work. So do this. It gives you some room to get up in there and reconnect that. And then this braided line here just goes up under the truck. There's a fitting. Now it's hard to see, but there's a fitting up under there already, up underneath where it comes out from under the bed. And that'll just go up and connect onto that. So let me get this under there, and looks good with the powder coat finish. But let me get this under there and get it hanging and see if I can get these two connected before I tighten everything up. And then we'll move on from there. Okay, there it is. Tell you what, man, this would have been a lot easier with a second person, but it is just me, and took a little wiggling to get this up in here without banging it up. So I got just the bolts are started right now. I got a couple on this side, and I only got one up front actually. And you can kind of see that vent line comes right out from underneath that bracket, and then it connects into that 1/4-inch tube right there. I just need to pull it back off, get a hose clamp on it, but got a couple options for routing that. And then if you look way up in there, you can see where my locker fitting, it's going to go right on the end of that elbow pretty much just like that. So I'm going to get all the bolts in, and then I'm going to pull them out one at a time and put Loctite on them, run them up and torque them. And I think it's like for these, I think it's I got it written down somewhere. I'll get that later. But that's about it for the diff. And then next is the brakes. And I did order new, after pulling this apart, realizing how much work it is to get these brakes out. I just went ahead and ordered new rotors and pads because I didn't like the ones after I got them cleaned up. So they should be here tomorrow. And you can see that heavy duty plate from Anvil up inside there. Would have been nice if they burned those letters in the other direction, but you can't see them anyway. And they are nice enough to put a little R for rear, and the other one has an F for front. But that's about it for today. It's Monday. I worked all day. I'm tired, and we'll come back probably tomorrow, and we'll get some more of this stuff put in, and we'll continue on. Okay guys, so I had to kind of go into reverse a little bit. So on my last segment, I had this bracket up inside. I went ahead and hung the differential, and I thought, okay, everything's peachy, now tighten everything up. But the issue I had was you cannot get a wrench anywhere on the other side to the nuts. You can't get in from the top. You can't get in from the side because the bracket wraps around. You can't get in from the back side. You can't get in at an angle. There's no way. There's just no way to get up inside here, and there's very little room to work over the top of this thing when you get it up inside. So I'm laying under the truck, and I struggled with this, and I thought, you know, I could make a jig to kind of represent, you know, what the differential is, and I could machine up a whole bunch of aluminum plates and blocks and put them all together and get that mounted up in there so I could tighten these brackets up. So this, you know, this is loose, so it has to move until these two forward bolts are tight. So I struggled with this for a long time as to how I was going to be able to do this, because this is in the way. This top of this differential is in the way from getting a wrench in here and snugging these up. So you're going to think this is insane, but I took an old differential housing and I basically cut the top of it off. So now I have these two holes on both sides, and I have the holes up front. So now I can bolt this bracket back in, I can bolt this up, and I can tighten all these bolts, and that should position these brackets and this bracket to where I can get a wrench over the top, because now I got a good 3 inches of space on top of this thing to work. I should be able to reach right up through here, tighten the nuts up, and then make it tight enough to where I could drop this skeleton out, do the final torque on it, unless I could do the final torque with it installed. And once all this is tight, then I can just go ahead and put the differential in, and everything should be good. So on top here, you can kind of get a wrench up in here to hold these bolts from turning, because they are lock nuts, and I didn't want to have to struggle with that. It's doable, but it's really tight. So I ended up making these out of steel, and it's basically just a steel block with a channel cut in it, and you just take the bolt, and the bolt drops inside, and it fits in there really tight, and it doesn't spin. So this actually becomes the washer as well, and I just painted them, and so these will be up on top, and I'll be able to torque the nut on the bottom and not have to worry about these turning. So that's where I'm at with this thing. I mean, it took me it took me a few days to decide, okay, let's take a perfectly good differential housing and cut it up. But these aren't that expensive. I couldn't find a used one. I couldn't find one that was ruined. I called a whole bunch of the guys out there, and nobody had one laying around. So I just sacrificed a good one, and this is going to be my install jig for these brackets. Now, if it was stock brackets, they're easy to get to, but because I wanted to use this heavy duty plate, now I put myself into a bind as to how I'm actually going to install this thing. So now this is going to go back in. These are easy to get to. The four in the corners, man, they're easily accessible. You get right up to them and not an issue. And I did find that putting in my vent line at a 90-degree angle, putting it on a fitting, makes it a little bit easier to fish it out and go up. It was kind of a little bit of a tight loop up there up against the bottom of those two bolts. So I changed that out. So now we're going to put this back in, and then we're going to put this in and see what it looks like and see how much access we have to getting these bolts tightened up. It didn't take long, so I got this thing all bolted in. Everything's tight, and the thing worked fantastic. Check it out. I've got full access to those bolts up in there, front and back, and I got them tight. I got them really tight. I got lots of room to move the wrench up here. This side's done over here. Now I can drop this cutaway here, and I can hopefully put the real differential in for the last time. And here's something that's interesting. On these forward mounting bolts, in the manual, there are no washers listed in the manual under the heads of those bolts. I don't know why that is. It doesn't make any sense to me, but they are going to get Loctite and they are going to get washers. So, I mean, the bolts are plenty long. They go all the way through the housing. So I don't know why they wouldn't put a washer under that or use a longer bolt with a washer. But anyway, that's how mine's go back together. So this thing worked fantastic, and I think it's absolutely ridiculous that I had to do this. But maybe this will be the weirdest tool in my toolbox, and I don't know, maybe I can make this a tool rental or something for people that are installing these Anvil or these Mod Mafia plates, because I just don't see any other way to get to those two nuts right there on that side and the two on this side without that cutaway. So having this thing work great. Now I should be able to just drop it, put the real one in, and we'll come back when I get that far. So while there's a lot of space up under the truck and I'm putting in new rotors and new pads, it's a good idea to retract the pistons on the brake calipers. We're going to do that real quick with this tool. This is about the easiest thing ever. So let's get into the truck and I'll show you how this thing works. All right, so basically you just take this tool and you put it over put it inside where the shoes go. You rotate this down until it fits over the hex. You back this thing out right here until it touches and gets tight inside there. And then all you do is you take an adjustable wrench or any wrench that'll fit, and you basically just tighten that up, and it will run that. And I can get it on here. And you just tighten that up. Oh, it's hard to get started. There we go. And it will retract that piston all the way because your new pads are going to be thicker going in. And this will also make it easier to fit all the parts together, because it'll allow some movement in that caliper when it all gets back up in there. Because you have to put the rotor, the caliper, the brake pads, the retainer, you all have to fit it in there all in one shot. So the more wiggle room you have around this caliper, the easier it's going to be to go together. So you just run that all the way down. Now, if you've topped off your brake fluid reservoir, it's probably a good idea to see how much brake fluid you have in your reservoir before you do this. There we go. That's in. Now you take this other one right here and you just loosen this back up. You run it inward and you screw it in to relieve some of the room. And you pull it off and you're done. Now it's time to put all the other stuff in. Okay, folks, it is a beautiful sunny day here in Phoenix. It is so crazy warm that I don't think winter is ever going to come. Today is also December 7th, which is Pearl Harbor Day. And I want to give a quick shout out to all the men and women that have served and are currently serving in our military. My hat is off to all of you and everything you do for this country. So thank you for that, and thank you for your service. So anyway, this thing is in. Let's get in here and take a look at it. So this went in like a dream. Worked perfect, everything lined up. I couldn't have asked for better results from that jig I unfortunately had to make to put this stuff together. So I've already got the brake brackets in, and way up there up top is the line for the ARB locker, and I'll show you guys the plumbing on that a little bit later. So now it's time to put the flanges on, and once that's on, we can start putting the brakes back together. So it should go pretty well, and I got everything ready to go for that. But as far as flanges go, there's not too much of a secret to that, but I get to use that little tool I made to hold them from turning. But you got your flange here, and then you got your nut in there somewhere, but don't forget, you get this little washer here. After your flange goes in, this little washer goes down inside the spline, and you put a little Permatex down inside here. Then you put this in, and you put a little more Permatex on, put that nut in, and torque it to somewhere between 165 and 195 foot-pounds. So gonna go do that right now, and then after that, it's time for brakes. Well, folks, we are all back together finally, and it went back together really nice. So everything is done. A couple little things I learned along the way. If you're working on your rotors and you're just and you're not hooking up your axles right away, get a small 10mm bolt, a short one, and when you put your rotors on your flange, just screw a couple short bolts into it to hold them in place. It makes it a whole lot easier when you're getting your calipers up in there and everything else. Don't use the ones that come off here. They're too long, and they'll go back to through the flange too far, and when you try to turn your rotor, they'll bind up on the brackets and the bolts that are back there. And don't forget to grease those little tiny points, like right there where the pads come in contact, right there, a little bit of a dab, top and bottom, and then of course the shafts for when your rotors want to adjust. And since the rotors were off and a lot of moving around and getting them over to the side and zip tying them in place, it doesn't hurt to put a line wrench on your fitting after you're all done, and make sure you didn't, distort that flare or somehow loosen it up a little bit, because it's a lot of movement and you don't get a lot on those hard brake lines. So I did put oil in it Sunday morning. I wanted to give that Permatex up inside the flanges overnight to set up. So we are full of oil. Drive shaft is back in, and all in all, pretty happy with it. And finally got the correct bolts on the half shaft, so that was kind of important. So let's go up to the top side, and I'll show you what the manifold for all these air lockers look like. All right, so in the bed of the truck here, I've got this CO2 tank by Power Tank, and they claim that this little bottle right here will engage those air lockers at least 500 times on one fill. And if that's not enough, there's a spare tank over here on this side, which will give you another 500 engagements. So if you need more than 1,000 engagements on your trip, you're probably better off buying an ARB compressor and putting that in. I didn't want to mess with the compressor. I thought I would try this. It just seems like a cleaner, simpler, neater way to go. So right now I've just got an air line hooked up here for my compressor, because there's no CO2 in here, and I wanted to make sure all this worked. So this line right here connects up to this, there's a little quick disconnect right here for quickly popping this off and changing this tank. And then you got your manifold down here, and you got the two lines that go down through the bed. There's the rear, there's the front, and then you've got your solenoids, you got a safety valve, you got a gauge to see where your pressure is, and that works really well. So now let me show you where the switches went. Since I did my interior a long time ago, before I started thinking about putting ARBs in here, so I made the switch panel for all my stuff, and there's not really any more room. I didn't want to add another switch panel, so I'm gonna have to get in here. Sorry about that, folks. So I went ahead and put in this a long time ago. I put it in Evolution CTS3, and I'm gonna have to start the truck so you can see how this works. It will not work with just the ignition on. So these things are fantastic for monitoring all your PIDs off your engine. So you've got you can set this thing up to do a multitude of different things, colors, gauges, I mean limits. You can set whatever you want. But a really nice feature on this is if you swipe right, they give you accessory switches, and I've only got the first two hooked up right now, and there's a little module down under the dash where I can plug in another cable for the other two. But I got front lockers and I got rear lockers, and this is kind of nice because if you're driving, bouncing around, and you accidentally hit a switch for your lockers or something, you're going to gauge those. Like, hopefully you're not out on highway speed or something like that. You're going to do some damage. So this is more of a purposeful screen to go to. You're not going to hit it by accident. So basically you just touch that switch and your lockers are on. That's it, you're totally engaged. And I went back and checked them and they are working. They do not rotate independently. So really nice little setup there. And go back to the right, and then yeah, this thing is really cool. You can actually you can clear engine codes while you're driving. You can do a whole bunch of, you get into diagnostics. And if you're not familiar with these, man, they are a crazy cool tool. And you can clear your trouble codes, find out what they are. And yeah, and you can change these screens. I mean, there's like 100 different screens you can choose from. But anyway, so that's it. That's it for the control side of it. And I'm really happy with the way this thing turned out. So all in all, I don't think I'm going to do a video on the front. There's really nothing different about it, except that the differential, if you look at these brackets, they're off at an angle. Because your front differential doesn't sit in a square. It sits off at a little bit of a cant. And I don't think I'm going to use this because Predator put in a really nice one when they did my 12-inch brake upgrade. But the total cost on this project was probably right around 10 grand. And that was for 2 new differentials, 2 ARB locker kits, the trip to California to drop them off and pay the Predator guys to install them so I get my warranty. And then I had to drive back out and pick them up. And then powder coating, the power tanks, running all the braided line. I mean, everything that went into this was right around 10 grand. So a nice little upgrade over the factory ABS or the TT4 system. That's a good system. And the thing is, you rely on your ABS computer to lock in your wheels. So the problem with that is it wouldn't engage until after your wheel starts spinning. So basically after you're stuck. So nice thing about the ARBs is you can engage them before you get stuck or think you're going to get stuck. So anyway, that's the wrap on this video, and hopefully you guys got some good information out of this. And I'm probably only got one more job left, and I want to get this hood painted, so I think that's going to be my next video. And the fiberglass, the paint on this fiberglass is just, it's shot after 25 years. This is the original color on the body. They only made 15 in this S15 silver in 2000 for the soft top, so they didn't make a lot of them in this color. But so the lockers are about done. I'll probably do the other one next weekend, and then sometime this spring, maybe after the end of the year, I'll pop that hood off and take that down. And that's probably going to be my last job on this thing before this thing goes up for sale. But I think it's time for another project. So anyway, this one's been fun. It took me a couple of weeks, a few days longer than I wanted it to with the whole differential housing thing, but it all worked out. So you guys, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.